ॐ आप्यायन्तु ममाङ्गानि वाक्प्राणश्चक्षुः श्रोत्रम् अतो बलमिन्द्रियाणि च सर्वाणि सर्वं ब्रह्मोपनिषदं माहं ब्रह्म निराकुर्यां मा ब्रह्म निराकरोत् अनिराकरणमस्तु अनिराकरणं मे अस्तु तदात्मनि निरतेय उपनिषत्सु धर्माः ते मयि सन्तु ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः अनन्तगुणपूर्णत्वादगम्याय सुरैरपि सर्वेष्टदात्रे देवानां नमो नारायणाय ते. Right, so good morning, good evening, and good afternoon to friends. Part 6 of Talavakara Upanishad, the Keno Upanishad. So we've been doing Keno Upanishad Chintana for about 2.5 months, thereabouts now. We are making very slow but deep and detailed progression on this amazing Upanishad of Samaveda. Okay, so the Rishis, let's think about the Rishi Chaturmukha Brahma, Sadashiva, Parvati, Talavakara Rishi, and all the acharyas who have given us the Bhashya of this Upanishad. Devata for this Upanishad is Vishnu. Of course, Vishnu has infinite names, but the special names that come to our contemplation for this Upanishad, through which we understand an aspect or the guna of Vishnu, is Hrishikesha, Kapila, Aniruddha, and Gayatri Namaka Paramatma. They are all the Devatas for this. The Chandas, as we have seen, the first two verses of Talavakara Upanishad is in Trishtup Chandas. Then you have Anushtup Chandas, which is the primary, which is the more common Chandas in Talavakara Upanishad. Okay, so where are we? So we are doing the third verse. Natatra chakshur gacchati, navag gacchati, no manaha, na vidmaha, na vijanimo, yat yetat anushishyat. So what happened before this? So in Vaijayanta, in the Meru Parvata, one of the peaks of the Meru Parvata is called Vaijayanta, and Chaturmukha Brahma is in deep contemplation of on Narayana, and Sadashiva approaches him and asks him the basic physiological question. Om keneshitam patati preshitam manaha kena pranaha pratamaha preti yuktaha Keneshitam vacham imam vadanti chakshuhu shrotram kavudevo yunakti. Basically, the last line is important. Kavudevo yunakti. Who is that deva who yunakti means regulator? Who is that deva who is the regulator that allows these various organs to function? Yeah. How does the mind function? How does the prana function? How does the vak functions? How does the eyes function? How does the hearing function? Who is regulating all this? What is going on in this body is what Shiva is putting that question to Chaturmukha Brahma for our benefit, really. Yeah. So immediately Chaturmukha Brahma, then having Narayana in his contemplation. Remember, Narayana is constantly in Chaturmukha Brahma is always thinking about Narayana. So he's got Narayana in his mind, in his contemplation, and he says, Shrotrasya Shrotram Manasa Mano Yadvacha Havacham Savu Pranasya Pranaha Chakshushash Chakshuhu Atimuchadiraha Pretya Asmal Lokad Amruta Bhavanti. So we did this over 2 to 3 sessions. We have looked at this verse. And last week we kind of had a summary of what is the core philosophy that is being discussed in in the second verse. The core philosophy that is being discussed in the second verse is the bimba pratibimba bhava relationship between the jiva and the and its antaryamin. That is a fundamental relationship, right? Bimba is dependent, bimba is independent, pratibimba is dependent. Object is independent, the reflection is dependent. So that is one important doctrine that we understood in the second verse. The second important doctrine is the antaryamin. So he who is the antaryamin of Shrotram. Shrotram means not the material ears. Shrotram means the Abhimani Devata or the Chandra. Chandra Abhimani Devata's antaryamin. Similarly, Surya's Abhimani Devata, Surya's antaryamin. Vak Abhimani, Agni or Parvati. Parvati's antaryamin. Chakshus, eyes, Abhimani, Surya's Antaryamin, Prana's Antaryamin. So that is how the philosophy is, that Prana's Antaryamin is Pranasya Pranaha. Okay. So we looked at that. So the doctrine of dependence and independence, and the doctrine of Antaryamin. Okay. So the next question is, what is this Antaryamin actually doing? Yeah, is he just sitting there quietly? No, he is the regulator. And that is the philosophy there that Sadashiva is asking. Tell me about the Deva. Okay. So remember, Chaturmukha Brahma and Sadashiva are having a conversation about this Deva. So who is this Deva? Eko Devaha, Sarvabhuteshu Gudaha, Sarvavyapi, and so on is what the Shvetashvatara Upanishad defines this Deva. The Deva is this Supreme Brahman, Vishnu, Narayana. And here Shiva is asking, tell me about this Deva. How does he regulate? As my Antaryamin, how is he regulating it? I want to know more about him. Explain comprehensively. Give me all the details. Give me everything that I need to know about this Antaryamin. So that is the prakarana, or the background to the third verse. Yeah. So again, as we have done in our forum for years, no verse of the Upanishad needs to be taken in isolation. It all has to be understood in context. Every word and every verse needs to be understood in context. So having had a quick revision of the first two verses, let's go back again to this third verse, because we are still in the first line. Yeah, we haven't yet come to the second line. So hopefully today we will have some conclusion around the first and the second line. As what is the deepest levels of philosophy that Chaturmukha is conveying to Sadashiva, and through Sadashiva to all of us. So when Sadashiva asks, tell me about this Antaryaman, how does he regulate? I want to know everything. Chaturmukha Brahma, in a beautiful fashion, in Anushtup Chandas, he says, Na tatra chakshur gacchati, navag gacchati, no manaha, na vidmaha, na vijanimo, yat yetat anusishyat, is the verse that he is saying. So that takes us to this fundamental questions of epistemology, the study of knowledge and the means of knowledge. Okay, so that is exactly the discussion that is going on. Yeah, last week we looked at the means of knowledge. Today, what we will do at some point during today's satsang is we will also look at knowledge itself. Okay, knowledge itself is profoundly philosophical. We don't kind of give attention to it. We are at every moment of our life, we are gaining knowledge. We are getting knowledge of the external world and sometimes about ourselves. It's the knowledge that makes us aware of everything, right? So the study of knowledge is actually a profound problem in philosophy, which is called pramanam in our shastras. So one of the two works that we kind of very briefly looked at last week is Pramana Lakshana of Madhvacharya and Pramana Paddhati of Jayatirtha, which is an independent treatise of Jayatirtha, but it expands a lot on the concepts given to us by Srimad Acharya, which is just a summary of the Vedic philosophy. So he said, Yatartham Pramanam Tadvividam Kevalam Anupramanam Cha Yatartha Jnanam Kevalam Chaturvidam Isha Lakshmi Yogi Ayogi Bedena. Very terse but profoundly philosophical. We'll come to this side of this slide a little bit later. But last week we did what? Tat sadhanam anupramanam. Anupramanam trividam. Pratyaksham anumanam agama iti. So anupramanam means means of knowledge. Kevala Pramanam means is the knowledge itself. The knowledge itself is called Kevala Pramanam, whereas the means to attain knowledge is called Anupramanam. Okay. So we understood last week that for any knowledge to happen, there is always a bipolar character of knowledge. Okay. There has to be a Nyatra and there has to be a Nyeya. I mean, we have to think about this very, very clearly. So Nyatra is you and me. Nyeya is an object that needs to be known. That object that needs to be known could be Brahman. It could be God. God is an object. Yeah. We need to know him. Who needs to know him? Not a stone, but a sentient soul like you and me. We need to know him. So we are the Nyatra. Nyeya is Paramatma, or it, of course, it could be the material universe. They are also objects of knowledge. It is only when the Nyatra and the Nyeya, there is an interaction between them, then the Nyatra gets Jnana or knowledge. So the basic equation, but believe me, it's a piece of great debate in various Vedantic schools. So the key point there is knowledge on its own does not exist. Okay. So some folks, particularly monistic thinkers, think that knowledge on its own exists, but it does not need a Nyatri or a Nyaya. Knowledge alone can exist. So other schools of Vedanta don't agree to that view, that knowledge on its own cannot exist. There has to be a knower and has to be an object that needs to be known. Only then there is knowledge. Okay. So it is the Nyatra who becomes aware or experiences. Okay. And that knowledge, if it's unsublated, that is, it is never superseded by another knowledge, is called true knowledge. Yeah, so we have discussed all this last week. So go back and do a little bit of revision on this, because these are all core foundations where, if our foundations are strong, everything else will be strong. And then last week we also had a discussion about what are the types of knowledge that we can get. So as you and me having a sadhana sharira and a material body, much of the knowledge that we gain is called manovritti jnana. So we use our external senses, yeah, and then the information goes in, and then there is a modification of the mind, and then that sends some data into the soul, and the soul receives the knowledge. So that is the common thing that has happened to us all the time. So that is called manovritti jnana. Okay. Whereas there is another type of knowledge called internal knowledge, that is called swarupa jnana, where your soul itself has a knowledge of itself and also its antaryamin. Okay, so that is called swarupa jnana. Okay. So again, there is lots of discussion about the differences between swarupa jnana, manovritti jnana, and all that. So I leave it to you to do your research and try and dig deeper into these kind of ideas, which is what Vedantic philosophy is all about. Talks about these things quite a lot. Okay, there is no airy fairy ritualism in the Upanishads. It's hardcore philosophy. So let's look about the means of knowledge. So means of knowledge of what? Pratyaksham, Anumanam, Agama. Pratyaksha is our sense perception. And we understood nirdosha, artha, indriya, sannikarshaha, pratyaksham. So for a proper perceptual knowledge to happen, there has to be an optimal contact between the sense organs and the sense objects. That optimal contact is very important. That if we don't have optimal contact, the perceptual knowledge can be erroneous. Okay, so that definition is very, very concise. Nirdosha artha indriya sannikarshaha pratyaksham. Then, of course, you have agamas, words. Through words, we gain knowledge. We read books, we read novels, we read books, we hear something what others say, and we get knowledge. Okay? That whole thing is called agama. That whole process is called agama, but verbal testimony, right? Nirdoshaha shabdaha agamaha. Okay, so basic stuff, but we are all very familiar with this. And then you have the anumana, inferential knowledge about when there is a fire on the mountain. We infer that when there is a smoke on the mountain, we infer that this mountain must have fire, because in the kitchen we have seen that whenever in the kitchen our grandmothers or mothers are cooking, there is smoke, and when there is smoke, we have seen the fire. So we make a connection between the smoke and the fire. That is called vyapti, and then we apply this into this equation, and then we get the knowledge of fire. Okay, so that is called inferential knowledge, which is very common in our lives. In our professional lives and personal life, we use a lot of inferential knowledge, whether you like it or not, whether you are aware or not. We are using inferential knowledge all the time, but we are basing it on prior perceptual experience. Okay, so that is what is going on in our mundane lives, where we are using perception and inference all the time to conduct our transactions. Okay, so stay with me on this idea. So why have we why have we done this tour of means of knowledge in epistemology? Because that is one of the key ideas that we need to understand from this third verse. Natatra chakshur gacchati navag gacchati no manaha. Let's look at the first line. Na tatra chakshur gacchati. Chakshus means what? Eyes. Eyes is an instrument, is a sense organ for perception, and it perceives those that have rupa. That is the tanmatras that it senses is the ones that have rupas, yeah, shapes, yeah. That is what the eyes perceive. But not just the eyes, but by implication, it means all organs, sense organs of knowledge. The sense organs that we use to assess the external world and gain knowledge. And there are five jnana indriyas, as you know. So, na tatra chakshur gacchati. So, Chaturmukha says, mate Shiva, with your perceptual knowledge, you cannot know about this Deva, how he is doing Yunakti, how is he regulating everything. You may not know through your eyes because you cannot see it. You cannot see it because that is totally non-material and so on. That we have discussed last week. Then, of course, Navag Gachati. Even with verbal testimony, how much ever I tell you how that regulation is happening, still it remains unexplained fully. Okay, so that is Navag Gachati. Okay, so we haven't yet come to know Manaha. Manaha there means, yes, of course, the mind cannot perceive it. But if, as I told you before, in the inferential knowledge, we use the mind. With the mind, we connect right with our previous experience. We look at the current experience and then we link and we see whether there is vyapti, and also it is an operation of the mind. So that is called Anumana. Yeah. So even by Anumana, you cannot know him. Is one beautiful way of looking at this verse. So there's a great Acharya called Vamana Panditacharya, and Vamana Panditacharya looks at this verse from this perspective. Na tatra vag gacchati, no, na tatra chakshur gacchati, na vag gacchati, no mana. Okay, so why is this important? So again, we have discussed this last week. Is God knowable through these instruments of knowledge? Is God's controllership knowable through these instruments of knowledge? So forget about knowing, forget about knowing this God as a very general entity. The specific details with regards to how does he create the universe, how does he do it, how does he regulate, and all that kind of stuff. Is this knowable through these three instruments of knowledge? And of course, this is the conversation that is going on between Chaturmukha and Shiva about this Vishnu Tattva, who is the Deva for this Upanishad. Okay, so this is, I think that this particular topic of Navag Gacchati, the words cannot describe him, actually is very, very deep and interesting. Okay, so let's summarize this as we have done this already. Materialize Tattva Bhimanita Surya by implication. Similarly, speech, not just the vocal cords, but also the Tattva Bhimani Devatas. And in this particular topic, the Vak there is Parvati. Yeah, so there are two things that we need to remind ourselves. There is the Vak Indriya. There is this vocal cords that generates the sounds. So that speech that comes out, the Abhimani of that is Parvati. Whereas the vocal cords Abhimani Devata is Agni. Okay, so Parvati is the Abhimani of Vak. Okay? And Agni and Parvati we should think, and Parvati comes here for, very important for our contemplation in the subsequent aspects of this Upanishad. So the key idea there is language has limitations. Perceptions has limitations. We understood very well because the material eyes only can see material things through which we get material knowledge. Yeah. But to see Paramatma who is non-material, you need a non-material eye, which we are not using at this point. So without non-material eyes, we cannot see the non-material God. So that is a given. Okay. What about walk? Is a bigger question that we need to deal. So hopefully over the next 15-20 minutes we'll look at this problem. So a disclaimer already, so this is going to be a little bit of a deep stuff, but my intention here is for us at satsang is interested and have a foundation. We want to look at these problems in great details and do comparative analysis and see which one appeals to us. So that is the intention for the next 15 minutes. So stay with me on this. It's going to be a bit terse and complicated, but I'm hoping for some interactions over the next few minutes. Okay. So Navak Gacchati, said Chaturmukha. Navak Gacchati. Vak means speech, words. So some basic ideas about words. The object or an idea signified by a word is called vachya. Okay, so these are all the Shastric technical terms which we need to understand. So an idea signified by a word or an object signified by a word is called vachya. Okay, that is literal. So the literal meaning of the word that signifies an object or an idea is called vachya. Okay, so there is a very good discussion about this in Vedantic philosophy. Is Brahman, that is God, Paramatma, is Brahman vachyatva or avachyatva? Okay. Is he knowable through words, or he is always unknowable through words? Avachyatva. So vachyatva versus avachyatva, and it's really interesting when you do this comparative analysis and study, because there are two entirely different spectrum of views. Okay, so let's look at Mayavada first. What is the Mayavada view of the Vachyatva of Brahman? Can I know Brahman by reading the Vedas? Can I know Brahman by reading Gita? Can I know the Brahman by reading Brahma Sutras? Because these are the Prasthana Trayas that we have, right? So this is the foundation of Vedantic philosophy. So the question is, through the Prasthana Trayas, which are just words, which are only words, can I know this Brahman? Okay, so here is the Mayavada view, which many of us may not be familiar with. Okay, but this is the view. Okay, so Nirguna Brahman, yeah, is the only real. That is the starting position of Mayavada. Who is this Nirguna Brahman? This Nirguna Brahman, Nirguna means what? No qualities. So no essence, no qualities, Nirkriya, Nirakara, Nirguna Brahman. Okay, so that is the foundational, that is the foundation on which the Mayavada is based. So their view is Nirguna Brahman is only real. Okay, but when this Nirguna Brahman, at some point, we don't know when it has happened, nobody can explain how it happened, but there is this unexplainable thing called Maya, which superimposes on the Nirguna Brahman. Okay, so we can't explain what this Maya is. It is Anirvachaniya, and we don't know when that superimposition happened on this Nirguna Brahman. We don't know. Who made this superimposition happen on the Nirguna Brahman? We don't know. Okay, but somehow that has happened, and that leads to the creation of what is called Saguna Brahman. Who are these Saguna Brahmans? Saguna Brahman is Rama, Krishna, Narasimha, Varaha, and all the Kapila, Aniruddha, Gayatri, Vishnu, all the ones that are described in our scriptures are considered as Saguna Brahman in the monistic view. Okay, and these chaps actually do not exist. Okay, they are also Vyavaharika Satya, not Paramarthika Satya. So they are Vyavaharika Satya. So Saguna Brahmans do not actually exist. Only Nirguna Brahman, who is without any qualities, is the only one that exists. But with Maya Upadhi, somehow Saguna Brahmans have come into being. Okay, so I hope you are with me on this. It sounds a little complicated, but the more you think about it, it should be fairly easy for us to navigate these ideas of Vedantic philosophy. So here is the Mayavada view. Okay, the Mayavada view or the Advaitins view is Nirguna Brahman is Avachya. Okay, so that is the view, that the Nirguna Brahman, who is attributeless, can never be reached through words. So, in that sense, the Vedas, the Prasthana Trayis that we study, if you're a classic monistic philosopher, yeah, there are only a few that are out there who are purist classic monistic philosophers. Okay, there are many who are neo-Vedantins, which we cannot take them seriously. We have to go to the pure classic monistic philosophers. What they would tell you is Nirguna Brahman is Avachya. You cannot know him through words. All that you can know through words is Saguna Brahman. Okay, so Prasthana Trayis can give you an idea of Saguna Brahman. That is the Vachya. The Vachyatva is applicable only to Saguna Brahman, whereas Vachyatva is not applicable to Nirguna Brahman. Okay, So in that monistic view, there is a difference in the view of who is a Nirguna Brahman, who is a Saguna Brahman. As I explained to you, it is the Maya Upadhi that leads to Saguna Brahman. Okay. But if you go to the other extreme, which is the Tattvavada, the realistic school, the what Tattvavada will tell you is, it tells you that Saguna Brahman and Nirguna Brahman are the same. Okay, there is no definition nowhere in the Vedas. It says there are two types of Brahmans. Dve Brahmani, no, nowhere in the Vedas. But for our communication, when we say Nirguna Brahman, it means that Brahman has no material attributes. And when I say it is Saguna Brahman, I mean that Brahman has got infinite non-material attributes. So in that sense, Saguna Brahman and Nirguna Brahman are the same. And as I told you, it's only view from different perspective. But Brahman is Vachya. You can know Brahman through words. Yeah. So the reason why this is important and I think is interesting is because Navak Gachati. Yeah. So that is what Chaturmukha has said. Navak Gachati. The words cannot make you know about that Brahma Tattva. Okay. So what is that is being discussed here? So the monastics and the realistic philosophers pick those Navak Gachati and try and come up with some philosophical ideas about who this Nirguna Brahman is, that is he knowable through words or not. Okay, so I hope you find this interesting because this is what, again, as I said, these are all the core foundations. The more we dig into the core foundations and ruminate on this, then we will get an idea as to which school appeals to me, which view about Brahman appeals to me. And then we as individual souls, we have our own swabhavas. And through our swabhavas, we might reach a conclusion as to which is the view here that will take me towards salvation. So meanings of words, okay, meanings of words is called vritti. Okay. So when I said manovritti jnana, what is that manovritti jnana? Even when I say something or when I read, that whatever information that I receive still goes to the mind and then the mind processes it and gives the knowledge. Yeah? So vritti means meanings of words. Okay. And there are two types. You can get two types of meanings from words. Okay. One is called mukhya vritti or also called shakti of words. Mukhya vritti is the vachya, the literal meaning of the word. When I say a car and it is really a car, that word car is a vachya. It's a literally, it gives me the knowledge of the object car. Okay, so that is mukhya vritti. Okay. Then of course in the mukhya vritti there are various types, rudi, yoga rudi and all that. So you can read up about what are those various words, and this is not just in Sanskrit. It is in all the world's languages. You have rudi, yoga and yoga rudi kind of stuff. So gata, for example, gata is a rudi, pot. Okay, is a rudi. It means you cannot do an etymological split of the word and understand what it is. Gata means rudi. It's a word. Okay. Padma Nabha is a yogika word. Padma plus Nabha. Nabha means what? Padma means lotus, Nabha means the navel. So when you say Padma Nabha, that is a yogika. It's got two words that are united together and you can split them and understand the word. That is called yogika. Then you have yoga rudi. It can be both as well. That is, for example, pankaja is an example. Okay, so these are called mukhya vrittis of words. All right. So then there is another concept called parama mukhya vritti, which Veda Vyasa talks about in Vedanta Sutras, of understanding that how every sound, every word, every letter, every sound of the universe only celebrates the infinite glories of Brahman. Okay. For us to reach that level of clarity of knowledge, we have to understand Paramamukhya Vritti. What is that Paramamukhya Vritti? Let us look at the coconut example. We have done this about 5 years ago when we did Brahma Sutra Panchadikarani, the first 5 sutras. So let us look at the coconut. So in a tree, there is this green blob that is there. We call this as a coconut. Some guy climbs up the tree, takes this out, peels the outer husk, and then we have this brown stuff. We call that also coconut. Then some guy, we take that coconut to the temple at some purohit, we do some archana, the purohit breaks the coconut, and there is a white pulp there. That white pulp also is called the coconut. Okay, so this is a classic example. So this green and brown stuff, this coconut is the mukhya vritti. Okay, whereas when you break open and go further deep inside, you get this white pelt, that is the parama mukhya vritti. So if you bring it in philosophy, your eyes that we are talking about right now, that eyes is, it could be this green stuff, that is chaksus, mukhya vritti. The abhimani devata of the eyes is Surya. He is also called chakshus, again a mukhya vritti. But inside that Surya is this Antaryamin who is actually called Chakshus. That is the Paramamukhya Vritti. In fact, the Surya is called Chakshus and the material eye is called Chakshus because they have taken their names from the Antaryamin who is called Chakshus. Sahasra Akshaha Sahasrapad Purusha Shukta. And in Gita 11:16, can we get one of us to recite the 11:16 verse, please? Who wants to take us through the 11:16? Anand, yes, thank you.
अनेकबाहूदरवक्त्रनेत्रम् पश्यामि त्वां सर्वतोऽनन्तरूपम् नान्तं न मध्यं न पुनस्तवादिं पश्यामि विश्वेश्वर विश्वरूप.
Beautifully recited, Anandji. Thank you so much. So even Gita will talk about netram, aneka netram, sahasrakshaha, and so many places in the way in Rig Veda you have these ideas. So chakshus there in the Parama Mukhya Vritti means Paramatma, but it also means in the Mukhya Vritti it means the other ordinary things that we need to know in samsara, such as the eyes and the Abhimani Devatas. Mind you, Abhimani Devatas are also in samsara, right? So that is the Vachya, Vachyatva, yeah, Mukhya Vritti, Parama Mukhya Vritti. Hold on to this idea because next one is where the differences between the monistic view and the Tattvavada view becomes very, very interesting. Okay? So Lakshana. Then there are other ways in which we understand the words, right? Metaphorical understanding of words. Metaphors. We use metaphors and similes everywhere in our language, even in English, but in Sanskrit it is there everywhere. There are so many verses in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad and Chandogya Upanishad where metaphors are used. And the metaphors have to be used very carefully. There are rules for using metaphors. And that is an entirely different debate. But anyway, Lakshana. This is called the Lakshana Vritti. So Mukhya Vritti and Lakshana Vritti. So though in the scriptures there is a lot of metaphorical meanings that you can obtain. And there are various metaphors. I'll come to that in the next slide. Jahad Lakshana, Ajahad Lakshana, Jahad Ajah Lakshana. There are three Lakshanas. Primarily two. Jahad Lakshana, Jahal Lakshana, Ajahal Lakshana. Okay. There is one peculiar metaphor called Jaha Ajahat Lakshana that again is exclusive to monastic philosophers. Okay. And we will see what that means. But anyway, let's look at the similes and metaphor. Her heart is gold doesn't mean that heart is made of gold. Okay. It just means it's beautiful, it's bright, it's pure, and the world is a stage. Doesn't mean in the world there is a stage and everybody is there. It is just to say there's all these things that are going on. He is a pig doesn't mean he is literally a pig. He is probably a dirty fellow. You are a rock. You are a rock possibly means that you're strong, you're firm, and stuff like that. You are my sunshine, sea of sand, all those kind of metaphors that we use. That is called Lakshana Vritti. Okay, so if you look at Lakshana Vritti, there are three types, as I told you, right? Then there are classic examples that are given. Jahad Lakshana. Jahati means abandon. That is why it's called Jahad Lakshana. Jahati Lakshana, Jahal Lakshana. Jahati means you give up or abandon the primary meaning of the word, but you take some other meaning. So when they say Benares is a city on the Ganges, when I say Benares is city on the Ganges, it does not mean that Benares is literally on the river Ganges. No, it is on the banks of the river Ganges. Yeah, so it is just metaphorically we say Benares is a city on Ganges. Why do we say that? Because to say that it's a very sacred river. It's a very sacred city because it's near Ganges. It's very cool. There is always breeze. It's very sacred. And to get those ideas, we use metaphors. So Benares is city on the Ganges. We remove the Ganges and we say on the banks of the river Ganges. So because we remove the primary meaning of Ganges, but we use another meaning, another word to link it, it's called Jahad Lakshana. So we have Jahati, we have abandoned Ganges, but we have added in the banks of the river Ganges. Banks, okay. banks of the river Ganges is a different set of words, yeah, rather than Ganges. Then there is something called Ajaha Lakshana. Ajaha means Ajahati, you retain. So if our soldiers are carrying the Indian flag and we say the flags are advancing, it means not only the flags are advancing, but we also understand that the soldiers who are carrying the flag are also advancing. Okay, it gives the two metaphorical meanings. So that is called Ajaha Lakshana. And then there is this peculiar, Lakshana used in Mayavada, which is called Jahad Ajaha Lakshana. Okay, where you abandon some and retain some. They classically use it for Tattvamasi, but we have seen how problematic that interpretation is in a few years ago. Okay, so yeah, so three Lakshanas. Okay. So, and of course, you have to use minimum lakshanas only to get a meaning. That's called Kalpana Lagava versus Kalpana Gaurava and all that. Then, of course, we have read about this thing called Occam's razor, probably influenced by our Sanskrit philosophers. If two explanations are equally plausible, the simplest explanation, usually the one with the fewest assumption, is preferred. Okay, these are all the rules, but all, I believe, inspired from our Vedic philosophy. So, as I said, I did give you a disclaimer that there are lots of these kind of basic things to understand about Mukhyavriti, Paramamukyavriti, Lakshanavriti, Jahalakshanavritti, Ajahalakshanavritti, Jahad, Ajahad Lakshanavritti, and so on. So, if you have these backgrounds, this is the problem, okay, with our monastic philosophers. They claim, as I told you 2 slides ago, that Nirguna Brahman is inexpressible in words. So it is not my view, it is not the Tattvavadin's view, it is the monastic philosopher's view. So somehow they dig their own grave by taking this assumption. And I'll explain to you why that is the problem if you look at it from a very philosophical perspective. So, what is the monastic view? Let's think about this. Monastic view is there is this Nirguna Brahman, he is qualityless. And because he is qualityless, you will use words only to express something that is, either an object or its qualities, or it does this, it does that. To explain that only you will use a word. But this Nirguna Brahman is so nebulous, you cannot actually hold on to him, you cannot catch him. Okay, so he is inexpressible in words, is the monastic position. It's avachya. Why is he avachya? Nirguna Brahman is essentially inexpressible and therefore not open to denotation, that is primary meanings. Okay? Literal meanings, Mukhya Vritti, Parama Mukhya Vritti, and all that. The scriptures can still give some knowledge through a process called Lakshana Vritti. This is the monastic view. Okay, by reading the scriptures, you can somehow get the Lakshana Vritti, you can somehow get into the metaphorical understanding. That's called Lakshana Vritti. Through a process of Lakshana Vritti, which specifically is told as Akhandartha Lakshana or Chinmatra Lakshana and so on. So you can look at this if you're interested in that monastic equation. Okay, so essentially inexpressible and therefore not open to denotation. Who? Nirguna Brahman. Okay, scriptural passages yield only a non-relational judgment. Non-relational judgment means a metaphorical understanding. Okay, this is the position of monastic philosophers, and the reason why this is important is this verse can be problematic for that is the natatra chakshur gacchati navag gacchati can be problematic for our monastic philosophers if they cling on to navag gacchati and say, look, navag gacchati, have we not told you that our nirguna brahman is inexpressible by words? See, there is navag gacchati. Okay, that is where I'm coming. But our acharyas and our gurus pick all this ideas, and they take it head on and tackle it in such a way that it's a very sound rebuttal of that kind of a view. Why is that? So yes, Nirguna Brahman, Maya Upadhi, Saguna Brahman. It is the Saguna Brahman that is expressible by words. Okay, here is the problem. Okay, if only Saguna Brahman is expressible by words, but Nirguna Brahman is not expressible by words, then how does one know Nirguna Brahman exists? Okay, is the first question. If something is inexpressible by words, how do we know that that thing actually exists? How do we know that Nirguna Brahman exists? Okay. So if we cannot prove, so as I said in this section, they've said that, oh, through Lakshanas it can be known, but we'll come to that in a minute in this in the box that I have. If Nirguna Brahman is unknown, okay, how can you then establish Brahmatmaikya? Yeah, how can you, if you don't know who, if you can't explain Nirguna Brahman by words, how can you then flaunt Aham Brahmasmi and jump around and claim that that is a true statement? Is a question. Yeah, Aham Brahma Asmi. If that Brahma is Nirguna Brahma, and if that Nirguna Brahma cannot be expressed by words, if he is Avachyatva, then how do you know that you are that Brahma? Is the basic simple question. Okay, there are no answers. The answers are yet to come, because our Acharya in the very first sutra, Brahma Sutra Bhashya, first verse, he says, Sarva Shabda Avachyasya Lakshana Ayukte. Sarva Shabda Avachyasya Lakshana Ayuktehe. This is a very, very important point. Okay, I'll explain to you. I hope you'll be able to understand the beauty of this statement. Jayatirtha Nyaya Sudha explores this a little bit more and says, Vipratipannam na lakshyam kenapi padena avachyatvad vaidharmyena thiravat. Okay, beautiful answer to this problem of how our monastic friends get into a deep difficulty of actually knowing who this Nirguna Brahman. What is that? I'm giving you a nice explanation. If an entity is utterly and absolutely incapable of being expressed by any words in any language, then such an entity forever should remain beyond the purview of Lakshanavriti as well. Okay. This is the red one here is the monastic view. And they've said Nirguna Brahman can be known through Lakshana Vritti, and Nirguna Brahman can never be known through Mukhya Vritti. Okay. But our Acharya and Jayatirtha point a very, very pertinent question there. If something is not expressible in words, it can never be expressed by Lakshana Vritti as well. Why is that? This is a fundamental law of thought and language which our monastic philosophers have not considered. Okay, look at Gangayam Goshaha. Okay, so what do? Gangayam Goshaha. This hamlet is on the river Ganges. That is a literal word, right? Gangayam Goshaha. But what do? This is a Jahad Lakshana, and then we put Ganga Tire Goshaha. We have to put that word Tira to understand that this Gosha, this hamlet, is actually in Ganga Tire. It's on the banks of the river Ganges. Ganga Tire Goshaha is the meaning for Gangayam Goshaha. Let us say if this Gangayam Goshaha is some word that is talking about Saguna Brahman. Now we have to make a Lakshana Vritti and somehow say Ganga Tire Goshaha is actually by Lakshana Vritti we can understand Nirguna Brahman. The basic problem there is Ganga is a word, Tira is a word. There is a word there. Tire is a word. Yeah. Only when we know the meaning of the word Tira, then this metaphor you can actually get the knowledge. The Ganga Tire as a Lakshana Vritti can happen only when we know that there is a word Tira. Only then Lakshana is feasible. Okay. So even for Lakshana Vritti, you need words. So our Jayatirtha and Acharya actually has guided us in the right direction, and they've told us Nirguna Brahman can never be known in monastic philosophy if you take the view that Nirguna Brahman is inexpressible in words. Okay, so and I hope you are able to appreciate the depths of what is being discussed here, because Vidyam cha avidyam cha yastadveda ubayang saha avidyayam mrutyum tirtva vidyayam amrutam ashnute, says Isha Upanishad, where Yajnanamaka Paramatma has advised Swayambhu Manu, Swayambhu, knowing what is wrong knowledge is also true knowledge. Okay? If you know what is wrong knowledge, then you will be able to get rid of samsara. And if you know what is also the true knowledge, then you will be able to go to salvation. So think about this problem of Nirguna Brahman and Saguna Brahman. If Nirguna Brahman is avachya, then there is no way in which you will know Nirguna Brahman, even using Lakshana Vritti. So if Nirguna Brahman is unknowable, how on earth are you going to claim that you are Aham Brahmasmi if you don't know who Nirguna Brahman is? So these are beautiful points of philosophical discussion. I'm not here to give a dictation as to what is the correct view. People, as per their swabhava, can appreciate and understand what is the view that appeals to them so that they can make a direction. Prakashji.
What is this in the left corner of the red box? Scriptural passage yield only a non-relational judgment. I didn't understand that. What is that?
So here, scriptural passage, so this is the monastic view, Prakashji. Scriptural passages yield only a non-relational judgment means, so if, for example, think about, let's say, Tattvamasi. Okay, so when I literally take Tattvamasi, I will never get the meaning that I am Nirguna Brahman. What do I have? So if you take the relational judgment, Tattvamasi as a literal meaning, if you say Tat, that I am, but which even the monastic philosophers don't accept that. They will have to do lakshanas there. That is where they do jahad, ajaha lakshana. They take tat component, tvam component, remove a few things, and then just keep the chin matra, and then do chin matra ikya. Then so they are using lakshana vritti. It is not a relational judgment. It's not a directly you're understanding that sentence. You have to adopt lakshana vritti and then try to understand. So that is the meaning there, Prakash. The scriptural passage yields only a non-relational judgment is a view of monastic philosophers, not of Tattvavadins. Monastic philosophers view that, and this is also, I'm glad you raised this, because many of those monastic friends out there who claim Tattvamasi, I just would plead them, please can you explain to me through Lakshana Vritti, because that is your view of your school. Okay, it is not a literal statement. When I say Tattvamasi, it is not true. When I say Aham Brahmasmi, it's not true. Tattvamasi, it has to be taken in Lakshana Vritti, even in their school. Yeah. So I hope that answers your question. So we are in Navag Gachati. So the Navag Gachati needs to be known in the right perspective. That is where our Veda Vyasa, Badarayana, Krishna Dvaipayana comes to our rescue. Harish.
Oh, yeah. So I had the question. So there's this shloka from another Upanishad. I think I don't know the exact word. It says "aprapya manasa saha," right? So, is there really a debate whether the Paramatma is knowable through words? I mean, I'm trying to reconcile that versus what you're sharing here.
Yeah, thank you very much, Harishji. Thank you for pointing that out. If I may request you to hang on for another couple of minutes. So there is a slide coming up, picking up Yato Vacho Nivartante Aprapya Manasa Saha of Taittiriya Upanishad that actually brings this up, and hopefully we'll be able to square that circle. So if you don't mind, just hang on a minute with us and let's kind of go through this. Yeah. So that Natatra Chakshur Gachati Navag Gachati is very important, that Vag Gachati. Because our Veda Vyasa, Sutrakara, Badarayana has said Brahman should be known only through scriptures, okay, which includes, of course, the Veda. So Brahman should be known only through the Vedas is what Badarayana said. What is the whole sequence of the first 5 sutras? Atato Brahma Jignasa, then therefore inquiry into Brahman shall begin. Who is this Brahman? Janmadhyasya yataha, he who is the creator of the universe, etc., is Brahman. How can I know that creator of the universe, who is called Brahman? Shastra Yonitvat, you can know him only through the Shastras. Then the 4th sutra is what? If I have to know him through the Shastras, how do I read the Shastras? Because in one portion it is saying one thing, in another portion it is saying the other thing, as Harish has pointed out, it is saying in other. How do I then do the Shastra? How do I study the Shastra? If the Shastra Yonitvad is true, then Badarayana immediately said Tattu Samanvayat. Do samanvaya of the shastras, read the scriptures in various rules that are there, savakasha shruti, niravakasha shruti, upajivaka pramanya prabalya, then the interpretational tatparya lingas of purva mimamsa shastras, use all those interpretations, then you arrive at a samanvaya. Don't just pluck words and jump and come up with an airy fairy idea. You have to do like how we do in our professional lives, our personal lives, where we do Thira Visaranai, as it said in Tamil, yeah, that you have to investigate this in great detail. Without that, you don't arrive at any truth. The detailed investigation is the Samanvaya, Tattu Samanvaya. But the fifth sutra is where the problem is, exactly as what Harish ji just now pointed out. But the Upanishads themselves declare that God cannot be described in words, as he is beyond comprehension, is the objector's view, Purva Paksha view there. This Upanishad, Keno Upanishad, has said Navagachati, he cannot be known through words, he is beyond comprehension. And as Harish ji mentioned, Yato Vacho Nivartante, Aprapya Manasa Saha, Aprapya, he cannot be grasped by Manas. Saha, Manasa Aprapya. Yata Vacho Nivartante. Nivartante means he cannot be explained fully. Mundaka Upanishad also has said the same, right? Na chakshusha grihyate napi vacha. Katha Upanishad, Ashabdam, Asparsham, Arupam, Avyayam, Tata, Arasam, Nityam, Agandavachayat. Mandukya Upanishad, Adrishtam, Avyayam, Avyavaharyam, Agrahyam, Alakshyam, Achintyam, Avyapadeshyam. Yeah. Eka Atma Pratyaya Saram. All those things, we have actually done those words, those verses. So Upanishads themselves are declaring that God cannot be known to words, but then you are saying Shastra Yonitvat. What nonsense is what the Purva Paksha is saying. So the doubt there, so this is Vadakatha, right? Philosophical discussion should be done in this framework. There is the Vishaya, which is the subject matter. There is the Vishaya, which is the doubt. There is the Purva Paksha, which is the objector view. Then there is the conclusion or the Siddhanta. Then you get you get some benefits by actually knowing what is the true knowledge. Okay? So we have to go through this to actually understand what is actually going on here. Okay. So let's think about this doubt. Yeah. So one reason why God or Paramatma can never be approached or grasped through words could be the internal evidence in the Vedas itself, as how Harish ji also pointed out for our benefit, that there are many verses in the Vedas, and I've just summarized, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those verses, which says he cannot be known through words. Then, of course, the other verbal reference. Why do we do verbal reference in our? What is the purpose of language in the first place? If we use words to describe what, to describe a substance, or that substance attributes, or that substance, what does it do? Yeah. Or in which group does it belong? Cowness. If it is a cow, it is an object which is a cow, which has got this, it has got the attributes of its genus called the cowness, and all those things. That is the only purpose. But you have said your Brahman is non-material in all this. So how can any word can describe? So that is the second argument. The third argument is Taittiriya Brahmana says Anantavai Vedaha. Vedas are infinite. So the Purva Paksha says, has anybody studied all the infinite Vedas? How do we know that the Shastras uniformly talk about Brahman? And how do you know that they uniformly talk about the expressibility of Brahman? How can you be sure? Yeah, so these are all the problem. Beautiful discussion in the fifth sutra. Yeah, what is that fifth sutra? We'll come to that in a minute. And the Purva Paksha, based on these three arguments, will say Shastra study is purposeless, because through words we can never reach this entity which is so nebulous. So why waste your time of actually saying, oh, Janmadhyasya yataha, this Brahman is the creator of the universe? This definition stands refuted, says the Purva Paksha. Okay. Avachyatva of Brahman, as Brahman is Nirguna, Avachyatva of Brahman is the chief objection to Shastra Samanvaya, says the objector. What does our founding father, Veda Vyasa, Badarayana says? This is where he comes to a real rescue. That's why we celebrate Veda Vyasa as the founding father of Vedanta Sutra, because he has not left any topic undiscussed. So immediately he puts this sutra, Ikshate na ashabdam, gaunashchenatva shabda, tannishtasya mokshopadeshat, hetva chavachanacha, swapyayat, gati samanyat, shrutatvacha. Okay, so many sutras, important adhikaranam, Ikshatyadhikaranam, but we will just take up just one is enough for today's contemplation, because that settles and answers this problem around Navagachati. Ikshatehe na ashabdam. So we split this sutra. Ikshatehe plus na plus ashabdam. So that becomes Ikshater na ashabdam. Okay. Ashabdam, split it into a plus shabdam. So na plus a plus shabdam. There are two negatives here. Na and a are negatives. Yeah, double negatives. And our gurus teach us when the shastras do a lot of double negatives in various places. And when there is double negative, it is stressing on a positive answer. Wherever a positive thing needs to be stressed, a double negative is used in our Vedic scriptures, but also in common, colloquial language as well. And there are various double negatives, right? Gita 2:12. Who wants to take up the Gita 2:12? Beautiful double negative. The very first verse of philosophy of Gita. Who wants to recite 2:12? Shall I pick one? Neetaji, do you want to do the 2:12 for us, please?
न त्वेवाहं जातु नासं न त्वं नेमे जनाधिपा न चैव न भविष्यामः सर्वे वयमतः परम्.
Thank you, Neetaji. Excellent, excellent. So yeah, double negative. First philosophy of Gita, 2:12 is the first philosophy that is in double negative. Why? Because it stresses an important pointing. Similarly, the same Sutrakara who composed Gita also puts this sutra na ashabdam. So how do you do? You bring up tat. Tat na ashabdam. Why? Because ikshate he. The root, the ikshatehe comes from the root iksh. Iksh means to see. To see means what? To know. Okay. So the way we read the sutra is tat or Brahma na ashabdam ikshatehe. Brahman is not inexpressible as it is an object of knowledge. Why? Here is the answer, Harish ji, for you. There are other sets of Vedic words which tell us this Brahman should be known, should be seen. Sa etasmat jivaganat parat param purushayam purusham ikshate. Purusha there is Paramatma ikshate, to see, to know. Ekam sat vipra bahuda vadanti agnim yamam matarishwanam ahuhu Rigveda. And our famous verse in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, Atma va are drashtavyaha, he should be seen. Shrotavyo mantavyo nitidya sitavyaha maitreyi, for him to be seen, do all this shrotra manana and all that. The same Brihadaranyaka Upanishad also says, Atmanyeva Atmanam Pashyet. This Atma should see the Paramatma. Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, Vignaya Pragnam Kurvate. Katha Upanishad, we have done this, right? Sarve Vedaha Yat Padam Amananti. The whole of the Veda only talk about this Brahman. So when these verses are there, then but our Kena Upanishad said Nava Gachati. There is a way to understand that. We have to square that circle. How do we circle yato vacho nivartante aprapya manasa saha? We should be ever grateful to our Acharya who has given us a reference in Garuda Purana. Natad idrigiti gneyam navachyam nacha tarkyate pashyanto api na pashyanti mero rupam vipashtitaha. So this Mero Rupa is very relevant to today's discussion, isn't it? Because that is where Chaturmukha and Sadashiva are having conversation. In the Meru mountain, in the Vaijayanta Parvata, they're sitting and having this conversation in the Meru mountain. And the Garuda Purana talks about the same Meru mountain. What is it saying? Natad idrugiti gneyam navachyam na tarkyate. You cannot see him fully, you cannot know him fully, you cannot understand fully. How do you understand that aspect? It's like how Pashyanto api na pashyanti mero rupam vipashtitaha. So for mundane folks like us, if we go to Badri Yatra and we are seeing these Himalayas, those beautiful Himalayan mountain ranges, okay, we can touch the mountain. We can touch the mountain with our hands, or we can see the mountain with our hands and then experience this mountain and say, wow, how amazing it is, how beautiful it is. We can experience as per our capacity some aspect of it, but we can't hug it fully. We cannot see every corner of the Himalayan mountain simultaneously. We can't hear all the beautiful sounds and the smells that come from the Himalayan mountains. We can touch and get a grasp of some aspects of it. That is the answer to the whole thing. When Rudra says Nava Gachati, it means We cannot know him fully. When he says natatra chakshur gacchati, means that we cannot see him fully. Or to see means what? To know. So we cannot know him fully. Nava gacchati, language has got its limitation. We can, Vedas are infinite, but still the Vedas cannot explain the infinite glories of Paramatma. Everything has a limitation for us. Pashyanto api na pashyanti mero rupam vipaschitaha. Let's close our session with these beautiful verses. So then what is the solution? Then how does it all work out? So remember this Mundaka Upanishad, right? Dhanur Gruhitva Upanishadam Mahastram Sharam hi upasa Nishitam Sandayita. Ayamya tadbhavagatena chetasa lakshyam tadeva aksharam somya vidhi. Remember, first step is paroksha jnana. Dhanur gruhitva Upanishadam Mahastram. Okay, Upanishads or the Vedas, including Keno Upanishad, that is the bow. Mahastram. Maha Maha means Mahavishnu. Mahavishnu's astram. Vaishnava astra. Okay. Sharam hi upasa nishitam sandadita. Sharpened by contemplation is this arrow. Ayamya. Pull the string. Where is this end of the string is? In your ears. Here. Heard well through the ears. Ayamya. Upanishads. Sharpened by contemplation. Then what you do? Lakshyam tadeva aksharam, but before that, tadbhava gatena chetasa, with mind in devotion, you hit the target. What is the target? Lakshyam tadeva aksharam. This akshara is Vishnu. We know all that. Lakshyam is this target. You hit the target. It is constant contemplation. Somya viddhi. Know that. Know what? Paroksha jnana is what our Rishi Angirasa taught to Shaunaka in Mundaka Upanishad, as you know. Then, of course, we understood Navagachati came in that situation, but Paroksha Jnana is still not Aparoksha Jnana. It is still Sampragnata Sthiti. We are still using material mental constructs. Our Rishi Angirasa again reminded us at that point. Pranavo Danuhu, Sharohi Atma, Brahmata Laksham Uchyate, Apramattena Vedavyam, Sharavat Tanmayo Bhavet. Again, your step 2. Pranavo Danuhu, Omkara Chintane becomes the bow. Sharohi Atma, you yourself, the Jiva Swarupa itself becomes the arrow. Brahmata Lakshya Muchyate, and it goes inside its Antaryamin, who is its controller. Okay. Then what happens? Apramattena Vedavyam Sharavat Tanmayo Bhavet. And so you become Sharavat Tanmaya. We'll finish that Sharavat Tanmaya Bhavet in the next slide, because that is a beautiful slide. So the same thing, right? Katha Upanishad have said Uttishtat, Uttishtat, Jagrata, Prapya, Varan Nibodata. Shurasya Dara, Nishita, Duratyaya, Durgam Pata, Tat Kavayo Vadanti. Shurasya Dara Nishitaha. This Shastra Abhyasa, trying to learn about Brahman, is like walking on a razor's edge. You have to be careful. You have to understand this properly. We have to be grateful to our Srimad Acharya for getting us onto this razor sharp direction very carefully. Why? Because Shurasya, Dhuratyaya, difficult to cross. Durgam Pata, very difficult path, no shortcut. Who says this? The knowledgeable declare this. So that if we do that, words, understanding through our scriptures and words, eventually what happens? We reach that aparoksha jnana. Okay. Prana, the same pranavo danuhu sharohi atma brahmata laksham yutyate apramattena vedavyam sharavat tanmayo bhavet. If you do these words, try to grasp this Brahman through the words that is there in the Vedas, which is documented by experiences of rishis. It is still words for you. Rishis have experienced this. This is still a word for you. But if you follow the prescription given in the Vedas, and at some point you will achieve aparoksha jnana. Okay. When you have Bimbarupa Shakshatkara, you will see your Antaryamin. At that point, you will understand who this Antaryamin is as per your capacity. You will understand how this guy is controlling you as per your capacity. Pranavo Danuhu Sharohi Atma Apramattena Vedavyam Sharavat Tanmayo Bhavet. When that Brahmata Laksham Uchyate, when you are doing the Jiva Swarupa itself becomes the arrow and it hits the target which is its Antaryaman and stuck there. Okay, so the arrow is stuck. Sharohi Atma, arrow becomes itself means the target remains the target. The arrow is tightly bound to the target and unremovable. The target is different, the arrow is different, but the arrow is constantly in contemplation of this target. The target is our Antaryaman. The arrow is the Jiva Swarupa. Okay, so that Bimbas Pratibimba Bhava relationship is fully expressed in Aparoksha Jnana and later in, not fully in Aparoksha Jnana, but we get a view of this, but it is fully expressed in liberation. The arrow and the targets do not become one. They are different. Okay, so the Mundaka Upanishad to bring here becomes so beautiful about that Navagachati. Okay, so we have spent the last 1 hour talk about this Navagachati because it is a deep philosophical concept, cannot be ignored. Nirguna Brahman from monistic view is inexpressible by words. If it is inexpressible by words, it can never be known. But their solution to that problem is somehow by Lakshana Vritti of thinking about Saguna Brahman, Nirguna Brahman can be known. But the problem there is even for Lakshana Vritti, you need to have words. So words is absolutely essential to know Brahman. So if we don't accept this basic tenet, there is no way of knowing even Nirguna Brahman. If we do not know Nirguna Brahman, there is no way in which we will actually know that we are Nirguna Brahman. If only I know who Nirguna Brahman is, then I know that I am Nirguna Brahman. So there itself, there is a fundamental issues point out the realistic philosophers. And the monistic philosophers, they have a rebuttal, but haven't had a convincing rebuttal yet. So this conversation goes on in the Vedantic philosophy. That is not our problem. Our problem is to try and find what is appealing to us and find our direction. I know what appeals to me and I will follow the direction. Similarly, there may be something that appeals to you. If you think that inexpressibility of words somehow will give you knowledge of a nebulous entity, that is fine. That is your swabhava and you make your directions for that. I can only wish good luck for those who want to take that approach. Okay. So on that note, I think we will close today's session because we still got no manaha. Tatra chakshur gacchati, navag gacchati, no manaha. And then the next line goes to the knowledge itself. That is what is called Kevala Pramanam. So we need to look at that Kevala Pramanam. What is Vishnu's knowledge? What is Lakshmi's knowledge? What are the Chaturmukha Brahma's knowledge? What are the Parashukla Traya's knowledge? What are the Tattvabhimani Devatas knowledge? What are the Atattvabhimani Devatas knowledge? What are the clarities of knowledge, including you and me? Our knowledge is not the same as Vishnu. Yeah, there is a infinite difference. If there are some folks who think that is their problem, but our knowledge, our clarity of knowledge of anything in the universe is infinitely less compared to the higher exalted beings and of course Vishnu and Shri Tattva or Lakshmi. So that is why Chaturmukha Brahma says, Na vidmaha, na vijanimo, I do not know. Chaturmukha Brahma himself tells that in a great humility. Okay, so we have to appreciate what is the depth of philosophy there. We'll pick it up in the next class. Okay. So on that note, thanks for joining us today for I think a very interesting, deep discussions of philosophy. If there are any questions, we'll take it up now. If not, I might ask Sureshji. Sureshji, is Gita Chintana happening next week? Do we have update or should we just carry on with our Upanishad Chintana? Do you know?
We should be able to, Madhuj. I'll just confirm in a day.
Yeah. Okay. No worries. So if that's
I
happening,
think Venkiji is there. So Venkiji is on the call.
oh, Venki is there.
Yes.
Okay. Venkiji, do you want to give us a overview and tell us what's happening next Sunday, please?
Yes. Namaskara. Great session. A part of what you described, the Jahal Lakshana, and all the vrittis, all of them will come into the 7th chapter because they are all interrelated, as you so beautifully pointed out. So next week we start the 7th chapter. where Krishna is giving details about the Jnana Vijnana Yoga, ultimately ending that Shatka in the Bhakti Yoga. So you're progressing with Jnana and relentlessly going towards Bhakti, and Bhakti is the crest jewel of what we are attempting to get out of Bhagavad Gita. And so we are doing that second Shatka. So I will require a lot of help and support from Suresh ji and yourself and other people to recruit people to be able to do the Chintana for Bhagavad Gita. And so in this Bhagavad Gita is the big shloka that is coming, Mattah Paratarannanyat Kinchidasti Dhananjaya. So we are all looking forward to that. And so I'll work very closely with Suresh ji and begin that process next week. We think it will be taking at least two sessions, Suresh ji, if I understand the earlier conversation that we had. And so we're hoping to do it in 2 sessions. And so I'm really looking forward to doing that next week.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Venki ji. Fantastic. Look forward to that. So on that note, Suresh, do you want to say Om and then we close today's session with Omkara, please?
Om.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Suresh. Hare Krishna, everyone. Take care. Look forward to catching up on Sunday. Bye. Bye for now. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.